Night, this early morning, 2:48 a.m. My thoughts, have meandered all day to something about me is I'm a native Floridian, so Sunshine State girl at heart. I was born in Orlando, Florida, and I'm I feel a rare breed of native Floridian. So my parents are from Florida, and I grew up just outside of Orlando in a beautiful town called Winter Park, Florida, that will forever hold an enchanted piece of my heart. It has beautiful brick-lined streets with oak trees towering overhead. It has lakes, lake after lake after lake. Something I love is when you're flying in over Orlando, you just, for me, it's just like you look at the footprints of God and there's just lakes, just little puddles in the sky at every which way and all these fun, funky shapes. And that's kind of how my dad taught me when um somebody who is a lover of maps and the layout of the land, how, we just should find out where we lived by the shape of our lake. And oh yeah, that's, our lake over there. And growing up on a lake was just such a beautiful experience. I would look at the cypress trees and the Spanish moss and just the shoreline of the lake and the way that the sun danced upon the lake in the morning, the clouds and the sunsets, and it truly enchants me and it's magical. And our dock was always a place of solace for me, and still, home on the lake is a place of serenity that is unparalleled for me. Being a native Floridian, just loving Florida, the state of Florida, everything about it. Um, Florida gets such an interesting spin, I feel, in a lot of ways, like today, but I love everything about Florida, the miles and miles of coastline, the way it wraps around, the way we have a panhandle, the way you can drive and be in the same state for literally, so Orlando being in the middle, it can take you 8 hours to get to the panhandle, 8 hours to get down to Key West. Like, so you essentially could be driving for 16 hours in Florida. It's flat on flat. There are some rolling hills actually, like in the Gainesville and kind of areas, but it's a beautiful state with beautiful, vibrant, independent, fiercely independent people. And I love it. And it also juts down into, the whole western side is the juxtaposed with the Gulf of Mexico. And then around the bottom, you wrap around to the Atlantic Ocean, which graces the southern side and to the Caribbean, and then up, the East Coast with the Atlantic. And being that in that position, it can and does receive tropical depressions, tropical storms, hurricanes regularly. And so today and I've, lived through many of those in my youth and growing up. And so my entire childhood was spent in Winter Park, Florida. I went to Winter Park High School. Love Winter Park. And then I chose to stay in the state of Florida for college. I went to the University of Miami in Coral Gables, and that's a different kind of beautiful down there. The mangroves, the banyan trees. I loved driving down the banyan tree lined streets in Coral Gables, um, and the mangrove forests and uh, all the beauty that is like Key Biscayne and South Beach. And then after college, I was back in Orlando working and doing grad school at University of Central Florida and UCF, and then getting married to JD and starting our married life for the first 4.5 years of our married life. And I attended medical school on the west coast of Florida, the Gulf Coast. And so we lived in South Tampa, very close to the Gandy Bridge, which there's like three major bridges that cross over from Tampa to the peninsula over there, Clearwater, St. Pete, Pinellas County, um, and down. And then I went to medical school in Bradenton, which is even further south. So I crossed every day. I would cross over the Gandy Bridge and just every single day relish in the beauty of the water. And it always brought me so much serenity. And even during the tumultuous, like arduous years of medical school and having like a 2 hour plus commute every day, I was grateful to drive over the Gandy Bridge, through Pinellas, down through St. Petersburg, down to South St. Petersburg, and then I drove over the Sunshine Skyway, this massive bridge, and then over to the other side, which would lead to like Anna Maria Island, AMI, and Bradenton, and Lakewood Ranch was where I went to medical school in that area in Bradenton. And that was a bit inland, but you could easily get to Sarasota, Siesta Key and Longboat Key and beautiful, beautiful areas that I treasure forever. Um, I grew up we were 45 minutes from the East Coast, so Cape Canaveral, Titusville, New Smyrna Beach, those were kind of like the closer beaches for us, but always treasured a Gulf Coast sunset and being able to live there for 4 years in South Tampa. Um, JD worked at MacDill Air Force Base, so we often met and ran. I believe the fact is like that along Bayshore, it's the longest continuous sidewalk or something in the continental United States. And so it's this gorgeous continuous sidewalk that hugs that part of the bay. Um, and I got to work at Tampa General Hospital there, and also worked, at All Children's Hospital in St. Petersburg and a lot of the Bayfront hospitals and throughout my medical journey and my medical career, like which began in Florida. And so on my mind all day, I've been marinating. I always keep an eye on Florida because Florida keeps an eye on me and it's part of me as a Sunshine State soaked girl in my spirit. Fresh squeezed orange juice. I have a high bar that is not easily met anywhere. Just growing up with fresh orange juice and my sister and I playing in these tangerine trees in our yard and just being these wild little Florida wildlings running around. There's wild peacocks in Winter Park. I can go on and on. So it's not unusual, right, to get tropical disturbances. And Florida people are very hardy, very resilient, I think people would do judge and say, why do you live there? And that is many layers deep. Florida is an exquisite place and space. And it's a gem of God's creation. And many people there, and the Publix is there, will confirm that. But this storm, this particular hurricane that is brewing or already brewed, continuing to brew and gain strength and bear down and have a path that looks, from all accounts, from what we understand of meteorology and measuring barometric pressure and the drops in barometric pressure and the organization of the storm and the mass size and the sheer size of the storm and what it's capable of doing from a storm surge perspective, meaning how much ocean water it's capable of displacing and pushing up onto land is terrifying. And I'm usually pretty even keeled about this stuff. And Helene was catastrophic already to many of the barrier islands, and island communities in Florida as it made landfall, and then also to Asheville and many of the western of the unnamed that they're not unnamed, but they're not getting as much traction, I think, in the news reports. But many mountainous communities that weren't, and even in the corridor there of like Greenville, South Carolina, and the whole like foothills of Appalachia up into Appalachia, that is unfathomable and unprecedented in what they're dealing with from the flooding and what that storm did in that region. And I am holding space for everything there because we have family from Asheville and I grew up going there, and that is those mountain towns. And my sister got married in Banner Elk, which is close to Boone, and my parents for a while had a place, a dream that was a long time dream of theirs in Beach Mountain. And anyway, that all of that whole area is fascinating. All those little towns, little communities, winding roads, and just something more curious around each corner, the way like the undulating hills and the purples and the great, like it's mind-blowingly beautiful too. And I'm grieving for the devastating impact that they felt from the recent Hurricane Helene, and truly the scope of disaster remains to be uncovered, as there's still outstanding missing persons and just catastrophic loss of property, of course, but lives far more costly / cannot be measured, right? The loss of a life of a a life force of humanity. Um, and we obviously recently experienced something like that on Maui, where I now have lived for the past 5.5 years, and that was the impetus to write the book, the Aina that is Lahaina, that I've shared on here before, and that has been out in the wild now for, I guess, 8 days, in the nonlinear healing path forward for Lahaina after the unprecedented, unfathomable wildfire tragedy of August 8th, 2023. And so the heaviness upon my heart today, and just I knew that that's what needed to spill over in my dialogue tonight, in my ongoing life story journal, talking story with myself and doing it in a way that is unfiltered, unscripted, and very raw and vulnerable, is that Milton, that appears on track to come in from a very odd, very rare angle. The amateur meteorologist in me, after growing up watching the Weather Channel hours upon hours, my parents love the Weather Channel, and so I can thank them for the my dad with his anemometer. And I mean, I can remember many storms where our dock was underwater, and I loved looking like, oh, I was walking on water, and seasoned storm person. I don't recall any storms from the Gulf of Mexico ever forming like at such a westerly point that Milton did, over tucked by Mexico, like kind of the Yucatan, and then having this runway of warm Gulf water to gain strength and become more organized and drop its barometric and become. Did the video feel like we're still recording, but it looks a little, yeah, that's fine. It looks like it's trying to load over there. But anyway, I don't recall a storm having that much runway to organize itself. And the Gulf waters are notoriously known to be very warm, and conducive for hurricanes to organize themselves to gain strength, as opposed to like colder bodies of water like the Pacific and then the Atlantic after that. But and also with the forces and suspicions and what we presume from like global warming impacts and other things can be compounding this situation. And so what's terrifying is watching it approach the western coast of Florida. It's always been a very apocalyptic disaster scenario to consider a storm to approach from a more severe angle into Tampa Bay, because of the beautiful way that the bay shares water with the Gulf of Mexico and then comes into this, beautiful gem of a city that is Tampa. And of course, all up and down that coast, like just amazingness, like below Tampa, as I said, like you have St. Petersburg and Clearwater and Pass-a-Grille Beach, and we got married at Fort DeSoto, which is this amazing state park, and then the other side is Anna Maria Island and Longboat Key and Siesta Key and Sarasota, and all the way down, like all the way to Naples and Marco Island and Sanibel. It's gorgeous. There's so many other places I could name and say, and Captiva and Sanibel and Gasparilla Island. And then as you go north, there's beautiful places, Crystal River, and more than I can even say. So they're just gems of places. And the rhythm of life there in these islands is beautiful. And so I'm not sure if this is videoing, but at least I'm here. The way that this storm is threatening and appearing to approach is terrifying and humbling, because it has the potential to come from a severe angle because of its size and organization to cause storm surges that would be catastrophic to South Tampa, to the city of Tampa, to all of the islands around that area, north and south. Um, and like working at Tampa General, which is the hospital in downtown, it's like situated at all these islands. It just makes me think of like all the critically ill patients there. They have a thriving, robust neonatal intensive care unit that I got to work in. Um, and it's a one trauma center, and it does amazing work. I got to fly in a helicopter with a friend who isn't the most intelligent, incredible flight med nurse, and she goes and lands with her team on highways and helps people who have been in crashes, and they get creative and they land wherever they need to. Could be a playground, could be a mulch spot, could wherever. These people are absolutely phenomenal. Um, so my mind from a medical perspective goes to, there's Florida is a ghost town though, in those areas. Millions of people have been displaced and mandatorily evacuated, but still behind is like the first responders and the firefighters. Some people didn't choose to leave, right? We hope they did, but I'm sure some didn't. And then the hospitals and their staffs and staying behind and taking care of patients. And there's just so many untold stories, right, behind all this. And so the potential for the storm surges to come at unprecedented levels and pushing in water quickly, swiftly from the Gulf of Mexico, along with the combination of the rainfall that is anticipated from this storm, and then the winds, that come with a hurricane. And this is not a puny hurricane. This isn't a tropical storm. This is a sustained winds of like, I've seen the 160 miles per hour. And even if it weakens somewhat, still the winds will be extremely damaging. So winds, rain, and storm surge, all of those together, that triple threat is truly unfathomable and unprecedented, and the likes of which we have never seen in our lifetime. And so it's been extremely heavy on my heart thinking about, I can drop right back in my mind to running along Bayshore and all the times I met JD after med school and work, after another long day, all of our Friday night dates at Chipotle. And then we went to Shell gas station on the corner of Gandy and what road was that? Yeah, right by our house. And all the times we ran over the Friendship Trail Bridge, which was this really cool running footpath that they ended up closing for structural integrity. But anyway, all of our trips to Fort DeSoto and where we got married, where we said I do, which already the landscape of that looks different after some storms when we've gone back. I walked out through these wispy, beautiful, like almost ironwood type trees out to the beach, which aren't even there anymore last time I had checked. And, part of life is the ebb and flow of and the cyclical nature of nature, and it gives and it takes away. And but with so many lives at stake, so much at stake, it's difficult to imagine. But the point of what I wanted to say tonight is we must imagine. I think that's a catchphrase or societal saying, a narrative that I actively have been for the past few years, working to eradicate from my language lava flow, from my vocabulary, that I can't imagine what you're going through. And people don't mean it. They say it in an innocuous manner, meaning they don't mean they're not trying to detract from somebody's experience. But what it does, I believe, is it creates more of a chasm between people. I would say we must imagine, we must challenge ourselves to drop into the empathy, compassion that is required of humanity to be able to hold space for somebody and actively listen to what they're going through. We must be willing to get uncomfortable and be comfortable in that uncomfortable. And so we must imagine what someone's going through. We must. It's a core tenet of what will allow our society and this world to heal, to be seen, to be heard, to be validated, whether or not you're directly impacted by this natural disaster or another. Like when tragedy strikes, we must have the capacity and the mental fortitude to imagine what another is going through so that we can be a force of healing and hope in their storm. And so tonight, as I sit here, I am imagining what it must be like to have to mandatorily evacuate and not know what you will come back to, if you will come back to that, and to worry about your loved ones if they are a first responder, a medical professional who stayed behind out of duty. We must imagine what it must be like to have the anxiety and fear over the unknown, over the forces of nature, which we humbly and always have realized that we have no control over. Wind is scary. I mean, tornadoes scare me. I do, though, believe that the most powerful force in nature is water. And so with the storm surges and what these hurricanes, these storms are capable of doing in the water, they're capable of pushing, as we can see with Western North Carolina, which is, you know, astronomically far from the coast. It's not somewhere you'd say, oh, a hurricane's going to hit there. Like, it's in the mountains, it's in Appalachia. And yet, what we're seeing out of that area, the devastation is caused by water, flooding, catastrophic flooding, and water, the power of water, and what that could do in the Tampa Bay area, what it did with Katrina, right, with New Orleans. So I am sitting here imagining, and I'm going to continue to challenge myself to continue to imagine and to say I can imagine, and I do imagine, and I am imagining, so that I can stand with my Sunshine State forever, Ohana, my people. The Native Floridian in me is holding space for the millions of my neighbors. Although I am here 5,000 miles away in the Aloha State that I now call home, I am always at heart a Native Floridian, and the Sunshine State has all my aloha tonight, tomorrow, and in the days ahead as you endure what this particular storm means. And I will imagine alongside you what life can be like, what might be required of you, of us, in whatever lies ahead. So let's imagine, let's drop into that. We have good imaginations, we're born with them. We use them wildly in childhood, and we must never lose connection and touch with our imaginations. And we are called to imagine and to drop into that, which then taps into our innate gifts and capability to empathize, to be compassionate. Empathy, compassion, drives action. And that's what, although thoughts and prayers, we love a good thoughts and prayers and good vibes, which I mix in from here from Hawaii. Those are all well-intentioned and beautiful, but often, and what's required of us is action, and that comes from imagining, which then stirs within you and me compassion, empathy, and the drive to naturally act upon that. So imagining and imagining. I can imagine. So aloha to imagining.